I know the supernatural is something that isn't supposed to happen, but it does.
AM 1420, WBSM presents Spooky South Coast with your hosts, Tim Weisberg and Matt Costa.
All right, good evening and welcome to Spooky South Coast. Tim Weisberg here, along with the silent assassin Matt Costa and science advisor Matt Moniz, and we are broadcasting here on WBSM, as well as streaming live on Spooky TV at SpookySouthCoast.com. Say hello to everybody in the chat room on Spooky TV who are out there tonight watching the show, and we've got a great show lined up for you because we're going to be diving a little bit further into the Amityville case. This is something that we talked about a few weeks ago here on Spooky South Coast with Jackie Barrett, and she gave us a lot of inside information from her dealings with Ronald Butch DeFeo, the murderer of the DeFeo family, and we're going to get a little bit more into the story of those murders, what actually took place, what actually went down with our guests Ryan Katzenbach and Alexandra Holzer. Now, you know Alexandra as the daughter of Dr. Hans Holzer. We've had her here on the show a few times in the past to talk about her father's work and carrying on his legacy. And one of the most famous cases that he dealt with was the Amityville case. So we're going to talk with him, talk with Ryan and Alex, not only about the case, but also about Dr. Holzer's work into the case as well. And it's just going to be another one of those shows, I think, where some bombs are dropped, where some interesting information is going to come to light, things that you haven't heard before. Because Ryan is producing a film called Shattered Hopes, the true story of the Amityville murders. And he's been working on this for a number of years. And he's got a number of articles, documents, letters, things that just nobody else has. So we're going to talk with him in just a few minutes. But before we do that, I just want to say thank you to everybody at the South Coast Toy and Comic Show for having me there last weekend. And what a great event that was. If you missed it, definitely pay attention for the next one coming up. I think it was in March. Because it was such a great time. So many vendors there with really cool stuff. I wish I'd brought more money with me because there was all kinds of great toys and comics and memorabilia to pick up. And, of course, got to see our friend Felix Silla again. And
he's a hot ticket.
He is awesome. He is definitely one of my favorite people in the world now after having met him. And Gabby was there, as well as a number of other paranormal people came and hung out, and all of our Spooky South Coast friends and family were there. So I couldn't believe how much fun there was to be had for a $6 admission. So stay tuned because we're going to be promoting the next one here on Spooky South Coast as well, so you'll know when it's coming up. And also, Matt Costa, we were at Rock for Christmas last night. I don't know how much of it do you remember.
A good amount of it.
Okay, yeah. We didn't drink that much. But it was a great show. Pat Travers just completely blew the roof off the CD Rec Center in Fall River. Corey Glover had a brief set at the end, but he made sure he played Cult of Personality for all the Living Color fans out there. And it looked a little different than he did in the video. The dreadlocks and the body glove suit have been replaced by a scally cap and an Argyle sweater vest and a shirt and tie. He was quite dapper. And I put, for those of you who are friends with me on Facebook, I put some pictures up from Rock for Christmas so you can check those out. You can see Wayne Morrison rocking out with Chris Holmes instead of Howlin' of Wasp, and with Pat Travers, and Terry Luce was there. And it was a really, really fun time, and I'm glad that so many people came out and supported Rock for Christmas. But they still need more help. They still need more support for the charities that they deal with here during the holiday season. So just go to rock4xmas.com. It's rock and the number 4, then xmas.com, and you can find out how you can make a donation. And it doesn't have to be now. It can be year-round. So make sure that you put them on your holiday giving list. All right, well, why don't we take a break? When we come back, we will be joined by Ryan Katzenbach and Alex Holzer, and we will talk about the Amityville case. The phone lines are going to be open all night long, 508-996-0500. or 1-877-996-1420. You can also email us, spookycrew@spookysouthcoast.com, and you can jump into the chat room on Spooky TV. So stay tuned. We'll be right back with more here on Spooky South Coast.
Everybody loves Rite Aid's new Wellness Plus Rewards program. And why not, when every item you buy gets you closer to 20% off your purchases every day. But did you know bringing your prescriptions to Rite Aid? Getting the whole store on sale for a year. Learn more and join Wellness Plus free at RiteAid.com. Then transfer your prescriptions today. Prescriptions paid by state or federal healthcare programs are not eligible, nor are prescriptions filled in New York or New Jersey. See your Rite Aid store for details.
The WBSM Mobile Text Club can make your busy life so much easier and so much more fun. But are you a member? Do you get daily updates of headlines, sports scores, political events, even your daily horoscope and trivia? Well, if not, join now. Log on to WBSM.com. Simply click the WBSM mobile button near the top of the screen and get started. It only takes a minute. Sign up, choose your favorites from a big variety of updates, and then the free content is delivered to your phone. We'll never send you mobile messages you didn't ask for, and you can opt out at any time by going online or using your phone. Don't be left in the dark. Sign up now for the Mobile Club from AM 1420 WBSM.
I didn't need help from anybody. I was good at everything. And this, the drugs and the alcohol, I couldn't stop doing it. I went down a path of destruction, just about escaping the feelings. Never used one without the other. It was chaos. Dump trucks, insanity plowed into us. I know it was the devil. I actually got suspended from baseball. I said, I need help, but I can't do it anymore. I fell on my own. You do with me what you want to do with me. But I surrendered.
Watch Josh Hamilton's film at IamSecond.com.
We sat the girls down, and Jeff said, Mom and I are getting remarried.
Brittany just buckled at the knees and started crying, and Lauren's going, is it for real? Is it for real? During that whole time, they've been praying that God would work a miracle and just put our family back together.
I just closed my eyes and I was like, Lord, you've done something huge.
Miracles still happen. IamSecond.com.
Hi, this is Scott Lang, Mayor of the City of New Bedford. Have you checked your medicine cabinet lately? You should. Every day, more than 2,500 teenagers have used prescription medication for the first time. Sadly, teens often experiment with medication they find right at home. Many young people think it's safer to misuse prescription medications than illegal street drugs, but that simply is not true. Prescription medications can be beneficial when used under doctor's supervision, but misusing medications can lead to addiction, overdose, and even death. Fortunately, there are steps you can take to help protect your children. Keep track of your medication. Encourage friends and relatives to safeguard medications in their home. And consult your pharmacist about disposable medications you no longer need. Remember, prescription drug abuse is still drug abuse. If you don't want your children to abuse prescription medications, don't give them the opportunity.
A community service of New Bedford, a partnership with Drug-Free America and the U.S. Conference of Mayors. To learn more, go to drugfree.org.
WBSM.com and Regal House Furniture have the perfect way for your kids or grandchildren to show the meaning of the holidays. It's the Christmas Creativity Coloring Contest. It's fun, and there's plenty of prizes, including family packs of tickets to Amityville Railroad and United Skates of America. For the official rules and how to enter, just visit WBSM.com. The Christmas Creativity Coloring Contest with Regal House Furniture and AM 1420 WBSM.
Chronicles for the American Diabetes Association. Diabetes is a constant battle. I know, I've had it since I was 6 years old. A lot of people don't consider it deadly, but diabetes kills more Americans each year than breast cancer and AIDS combined. Please join me in the movement to stop diabetes. Help us raise awareness and find a cure. Share, act, learn, and give at stopdiabetes.org.
Christmas is in the air. Since 1907, millions of Americans have decorated their holiday cards and packages with the American Lung Association's Christmas seals. For over 100 years, your gifts to American Lung Association's Christmas seals have helped us fight for healthy lungs and healthy air. Celebrate another year of Christmas seals at christmasseals.org. Order this year's Christmas seals and make them a part of your holiday tradition.
Think of the reasons people end up in the ER. You probably wouldn't think of West Nile virus from mosquitoes, asthma attacks from cockroaches, hantavirus from rodents, Lyme disease from ticks, even bites from fire ants and other stinging insects send 500,000 people here every year. If you could make a difference in helping to protect your family from pest-related illnesses, go to pestworld.org to learn how. Why wait for an emergency?
Turn on all your lights, lock the doors, and pull down the shades. Spooky South Coast is back.
This looks extraordinarily bad.
All right, welcome back to Spooky South Coast. Tim Weisberg, along with the silent assassin Matt Costa and science advisor Matt Moniz, and we are very excited to talk about tonight's topic. It's something that I've been following for as long as I've been interested in the paranormal, and my wife, who is a true crime buff, follows it on the other side, so it's something that comes up for discussion quite a bit in our family, and that is the Amityville case. And joining us on the line right now, we have Ryan Katzenbach, who is the filmmaker behind Shattered Hopes, the true story of the Amityville murders. He's on the VIP line right now. Good evening, Ryan. How are you doing? Hi, Ryan.
Hi, Tim. How are you?
Good. How you doing?
I'm doing very well indeed.
And we're also going to bring in, now Alex is also a producer and a consultant for the film?
Well, Alex isn't a producer. Alex is one of our interviewees in the film who attests to some of the paranormal things, the investigation that went on by her father.
Well, let's bring Alex on right now. Oh, I think we just lost her off that line. Sometimes it happens with our technology. We don't have the state-of-the-art stuff that I'm sure you're using to make Shattered Hopes. We have...
You would be surprised. You would be surprised. Duct tape and baling twine accounts for a lot of our equipment.
Oh, so you have seen our show. That's pretty much how we do
Actually,
it,
sounds like he has a higher budget than us.
Yeah, we don't get duct tape. We have to use masking tape. So, but
we get duct tape in lieu of gaffer's tape because they told us the gaffer's tape costs too much.
That's it. We get that knockoff stuff that they have at the bargain store.
Exactly.
Hey, but it works. Whatever works. All right.
As long as it gets the job done.
Absolutely. And also joining us on the line, we have Alexandra Holzer, and you know her from her book Growing Up Haunted, and from her work following in her father's footsteps, the acclaimed Dr. Hans Holzer. Good evening, Alex. How are you?
Peachy keen. How are you?
Oh, we are spooktacular here.
Oh, very silly. Hi, Ryan.
Hi, Alex. How are you?
Oh, long time no speak. How are you?
I am well. I hope you and your family's good.
Thank you, honey. Yeah, hanging in there. I was just telling Tim before, my throat is killing me.
Well, we're gonna try and make you drag it out as much as you can.
Yeah, you're so mean. You know.
We're not very considerate for people's illnesses.
No, you're not. But I heard that about you. I don't know. I should have probably not have come on. I should have avoided you. You're so evil.
Well, the good thing is, though, is now once we tear up your throat, then nobody can bother you for a couple of days.
Well, that's a good thing. People will thank you for it because they're tired of hearing my mouth. So.
Well, we want to hear plenty from you tonight because we're going to be talking about, like I said at the top of the segment here, one of the cases that has always fascinated me is the Amityville case, and so much of the stuff that we deal with here on Spooky South Coast is in regards to the paranormal side of it, that we almost take for granted the actual true crime case that took place there, and we just take at face value the facts that we're given. And Ryan, it seems like your film Shattered Hopes is going to get really deep into the story and tell us some information we might not have heard before.
Well, I certainly hope so, and I certainly believe that. For me, I know that I've always felt like the DeFeo case was kind of an afterthought to the Amityville horror. You know, we've always, through the years, we've seen the sequels, we've read the original book, we've seen a countless amount of documentaries on the subject, but it seems like the DeFeo case was almost kind of regarded as an afterthought. It's like the house was haunted, Ronald DeFeo was possessed, he committed this atrocious crime, and by the way, this family was murdered, blah, 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 and it's kind of inconsequential to the overall story. And it's really not, because to me, the DeFeo story is probably the more terrifying story that you haven't heard.
And I almost think that from some of the information that you, at least what's kind of come out a little bit in anticipation of the film, it seems like that could also have a direct effect on some of the paranormal stuff as well. I mean, Alex, your father spent a lot of time investigating this case and writing about this case, and can you imagine if he had known some of the revelations that Ryan will be unveiling in this film?
Not really, and I think that's the biggest misconception. Is I think people say, "Ooh, CSI versus the paranormal. They can't mix the two. Oh God, it's going to bubble over and explode." That's not at all what it is, and that's why Ryan and I giggle at this, because people don't realize that combining the Holzer backstory and putting it with, Ryan's CSI information, which is going to blow everybody away, because, there's just so much stuff that has been buried, so to speak, no pun intended, that people just automatically assume, oh, well, Hans was after the ghosties, and that was it. And it's really frustrating, because he was a skeptic and a journalist, first and foremost, in his career, and he was trained that way, and it was the medium he brought in, Ethel Johnson Myers at the time, that was his choice medium, he worked with many, to do that part of it, and he kind of delved into the history of the parcel and the town and the people and what happened prior, and that the fact that that house that's there now wasn't the original house on the parcel. And that's why he wrote in those books, but a lot of people either haven't read them or just assume things with him associated as the ghost man. So it was my job to step in, which Ryan graciously allowed me to and asked me to kind of clear that up a bit and kind of link the two together, which I always kind of sat on the fence with the whole possession thing, because, as much as my father was involved with that part of it and going to jail and visiting DeFeo twice when they moved him, that's very creepy, and I can't believe that he did that, but he did. I certainly wouldn't have done that.
Well, but your father was also very committed to, getting as much information on the story as he could.
Which had nothing to do with ghosts as far as he was concerned. His whole thing was he really felt there was something wrong with DeFeo himself. And that he never said the house was haunted. It came after the fact when there was the murders taking place. Well, we know that's a Class A haunting. When sudden death can create a ghost or two, or, multiple, So, I mean, he never said the parcel had problems prior to. You can have haunted property. It's not just four walls and a roof, and that was really a lot of what he kind of delved into, and the town's librarian and political people at that time, and Ethel's job was to pick up what happened as the aftermath as to what brought about the so-called possession, and so I delve into that with Ryan in the film a bit, about, kind of like my idea and where I sit on that, which is pretty much on the fence, and kind of what Ryan goes into is, and he'll explain it to you, is really makes you kind of think like, well, let's just go back in time, because fact is fact, and you can have theory, but when you have fact, it's almost like you have to look at everything and have an open mind. And
the thing that, if I can interject for just a second.
No, you can't.
The thing that interested me about Alex, the things that she told me in our interview pertaining to her father, what really made me set up and take notice was when she talked about him going to the town library and visiting the historical society and going to all these links to do his research on, was there Indian tribe that inhabited this land? Was there a possibility that there could have been a chief buried on the property? What have you? What really interested me the most was that after the story gained the notoriety that it did, was the fact that these documents and this material simply disappeared. And if I know one thing about Suffolk County and about Amityville, that seems to be their MO. After this case became famous, everybody hushed up, and I certainly believe that her father that Hans found information that may have suggested that there was an entity buried on the property or something along those lines. But you can't determine it now because that stuff has disappeared off the face of the planet.
Yep.
Well, Ryan, I'm assuming that, just through pop culture, you probably were first introduced to this case the same way we all were, by the idea of the Amityville horror, the idea of this, haunted home that drove a family out in less than a month. Was that kind
Absolutely.
of your... at what point did you become more interested in the murders behind the haunt?
Well, I'll give you the whole background.
Sure.
When I was very young, we had a rule in the house. As long as I got out of bed for school the next morning, I could stay up as late as I wanted. And so being, 5, 6, 7 years old, I never had a set bedtime. And my father worked a second shift job, and on Friday nights, a lot of times through the week, my mother and I would wait up for him to get home at around midnight. And as I said, the only rule we had in the house was that I had to get up. And the first time that I posed a problem not getting out of bed was there would be a bedtime at that point. And my parents were pretty, I won't say liberal people, but they, I was introduced to a lot of great movies and horror movies and all that stuff. So I grew up, just loving that stuff. So my mom had told me on a particular Friday night, she said, and I was in the first grade, and she said, there's going to be this movie on about this haunted house and the events that took place there, and it's a true story, and it really happened. And, of course, I think even from an early age, I think we're always kind of intrigued by true stories. If we're going to see something that seems, really sensational, but yet it really happened, that really captures your imagination, I think, as a young kid. And so we stayed up and we watched the movie, and I was just enthralled with the house with the eye-like windows, And, of course, I wanted to learn more. So I think by the time I was in the second grade, I remember my mother brought the Amityville horror home from the library, and I read that. And I remember my second grade teacher sent my mom home a note and said something to the effect of, "Do you think that this is appropriate reading material?" To which my mom sent a note back and said, "As long as my kid is reading at the 6th and 7th grade reading proficiency tests, yes, I do believe that it is appropriate reading material." So I read the book, and I think around the 3rd or 4th grade, I read Gerard Sullivan's High Hopes. And as a kid, High Hopes didn't really appeal to me a whole lot because it's a very legal book, very dense, piece of reading material. So from there, I kind of lost interest as a kid in the story. And I remember, if I saw an article on it or something like that, I would read it. But, you get up to your junior high years and you get involved in other things and you just kind of forget. So I think I was actually running a newsroom at a newspaper, and we decided to do, this was when I was like, I want to say maybe 25. And we had been assigned to do this section on Halloween, and the editor wanted both local stories and some national interest stuff. So immediately the idea, as I was looking through the internet, popped up Amityville. I wonder what new research has been done on this. I haven't read anything about it in 10 years. What's up? So I find Rick Osuna's website, theamityvillemurders.com. And I sent Rick a note via email, and I said, I understand that you're writing a book about the DeFeo case, and I'd like to do an interview with you. I'd like to do a story on you. And little did I realize that I was working for a newspaper around the Fresno, California area at that time, and Rick was actually from the Fresno area, so I had a local tie-in. So we met and we did the story, and I was so intrigued by his book that, also running a publishing company, that I asked him if I could option the rights to his book, and I was very interested in trying to to put together a screenplay adaptation of his book as a film, because I had another foot in Los Angeles in the movie industry. And that's really how I got involved in it. And my number one question in this case has always been, how could one person commit this crime alone with a high-powered Marlin hunting rifle, walking through a fairly small home? The movies make the Amityville house look like it's this huge, colossal house. It's really not a very big house. It's like roughly 28 foot by 42 foot, in size, positioned on a 50-foot wide lot. So how did this happen? And that was kind of the question. That was what Rick's research he kind of spoke to me on that subject, and that is how I got involved.
Well, and when I was younger and I, knew of the case, I always assumed that, there must have been some sort of, drugs involved, that the family was somehow drugged at dinner or something, and they were put under, and that's why, the sound of gunfire didn't wake one up while he went from room to room. But then I find out later that there was nothing found in their systems.
Well, exactly. There was nothing found in their systems, and not only that, but they also, the cops that night, they removed pots and pans from the kitchen sink. They removed food from the refrigerator, and all of this material, of course, was tested for the presence of any type of sleeping pill or, drug of any kind that would have put them under. And according to the medical examiner, who is now deceased, they were absolutely stone cold sober at the time that the murder took place.
Well, and there's when that just opens up that whole question of for what reason could that sound not wake another person up, not only rooms away, but within the same room?
Can I make a comment?
Sure.
Well, only for the simple fact that I go shooting every Sunday and I'm quite familiar with guns.
And he's also murdered.
Oh no!
He's murdered entire houses of squirrels.
Yes,
oh,
squirrels.
No. Don't piss him off. Go ahead.
No, but with firearms, yes, you would hear the report of the rifle if it's held a certain distance away. If it's held up close to the body, it would be muffled. So it would be plausible to be able to go up with a. Now you're saying it was a Marlin rifle, correct?
Right. It was a 35 caliber.
They don't make a 35 caliber. 32 caliber, maybe.
No, this one was a 35. It was a 35 CS or CR model. Or excuse me.
That's the model of the rifle.
Yeah, it was a 336 CR, I do believe, was the model number on it, and it was a 35 caliber.
I've never heard of a 35 caliber.
As I understand it, it's a fairly rare gun because we went, we had to go locate one, and it took us forever to actually find one for our forensic team to be able to use because they wanted to fire the rifle firsthand to hear what it would sound like. So it took us a considerable amount of time, but yes, there is a 35 Marlin.
Okay, I'll take your word on it because there are literally hundreds of different types of calibers, but regardless of the caliber, short of something like a large caliber like 30-06 or something, you would, if you put it up to the side of the body and pulled the trigger, there really wouldn't be that much noise.
Well, that's one thing in the movies that they make them in the movies, and it sounds to me in all the movies I've seen more like a shotgun blast, And the thing that I noticed in firing the rifle is that, as you're saying, it's a very different sound. It's to me, it's a much higher pitched sound. It doesn't have this booming sound to it like you get in the movies.
Right.
And it is, yes, you're right. The pitch is very different than what you're. And what we did in the film was we actually recorded the sound of that, the actual rifle, not the one that actually killed the family, but that model.
Right.
Because we wanted to portray that accurately in the film with regards to what it would have really sounded like. I found that in an enclosed environment, I can't understand how in supposedly rapid-fire procession, because you have to remember, mother and father were each shot twice, okay? I can't imagine how, even with it not as loud as what we see in the movies, someone should have still heard this. Somebody should have got the message in that house very quickly that something was up.
Is this a lever action?
This was a lever action.
Lever action probably held about 6 rounds in the tube.
7.
7? Okay.
We have
7,
somebody.
which
I was going to
he
say
would have actually had to have reloaded the rifle at one point.
Right.
we have somebody on the line that if it's who I think it might be, they might be able to offer a little insight. Good evening. You're on Spooky South Coast with Ryan Katzenbach and Alex Holzer. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing pretty good. I don't think I'm the person
Oh,
you're expecting.
I was thinking it was John,
Yeah.
our gunsmith friend.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I should have known. I'm the psychic. Forget it. I goofed. Sorry. I'm sleeping.
If you're a psychic, do you know who I am?
No, that was a joke. And yes, I am, and I'm intuitive, but I'm not focusing. No, I don't. Keep talking. Let me see.
Hey, my question. I don't see why they had to. Why there's a question of them waking up or not. I don't think they were shot when they were asleep. I think people did wake up. I mean, Louise DeFeo, the wife, her body positioning was as she was rising up from the bed when she was shot, so that shows she was awake. Allison, the little daughter, was shot point blank in the face, so she was looking right up at the gun, so she was awake. And the two boys, as I understand it, I think they were clutching the bed sheets. I think there was a report of that.
Yes,
Ryan
correct.
would know all this.
I was going to say, I was waiting for Ryan to jump in.
Yeah, Ryan knows. Trust me. He's got all that stuff.
Yes, that is true.
Yeah, so I think it's really plausible that everyone was awake, and when faced with a guy with a gun, they just did what he said, and you know, I mean, what could they do? One of the boys had he was in a wheelchair. He had an accident, and he was in a wheelchair. So, you know, it's not like he could get out of bed and run away, you know, from that himself.
Wasn't it what was it, Ryan? A football?
It was a
thing?
football injury. About a month
it was an
before.
injury.
Yeah, I believe it happened late September, early October, if I recall.
Yeah, so I don't think there's really a mystery about that. I think they were awake. I think the family was awake.
Well, that's interesting. Thank you,
Well,
caller.
the mystery, one of the great mysteries to me that I don't understand is I don't understand Dawn DeFeo, the eldest daughter, who shared the attic floor with Butch. Her bedroom was on the opposite side of Butch's. And what I don't understand, and I never have, is why in all the crime scene pictures you can clearly see that Dawn DeFeo had an extension right next to her bed. And if she was the last one to be killed, if she was the last one to die, and she was awake, why didn't she call 911? That is a question that persists for me.
Well, the other question, it leads to the other question of if they were out of their beds, and this is something that I know that you posed in the trailer for the film, and if they were out of their beds and he did shoot Ron DeFeo Sr. and Butch did act alone, how did he get him back into the bed?
That's the million-dollar question.
Because that's a big guy, you know. I weigh kind of close to what he would weigh, and I think a guy. I mean, Butch was not a big strapping guy, right?
No, he was about 160, 165 pounds.
So for him to have acted alone and been able to get his father up into the bed, which is it true, Moniz? You would probably know better than I would, but isn't it true that when a person is expired, it's actually harder to move their body because
they don't call it dead weight for nothing.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, exactly. No, the thing about, okay, in the lab reports, the inventory of all of the items that were taken out of the DeFeo house that night, one of the interesting things that was documented was item number 26 on the lab report, was a swatch of carpet taken from the second floor hallway, which is one of the areas where we believe Big Ronnie DeFeo would have fallen and would have hit the carpet if the account that Butch DeFeo gave to Rick Osuna in 2000, which I want to note, our documentary is based upon Rick Osuna's book, The Night the DeFeos Died. Rick spent about 3 years worth of research and gathered a lot of documents, and I think Rick was the first one to really bring a lot of the very questions we're talking about to the surface. You know, and to kind of raise the question, was it possible that multiple people were involved? And in looking at his book, I had a lot of other questions that I wanted to know. So I did a lot of outreach to a lot of other individuals, you know, Alex being one of them. And in all, I believe right now I'm sitting on something like 17 or 18 interviews in the film, and a lot of these people are people that have never talked before and we've never heard from before, that have a lot of knowledge on the case. And the And so I took Rick's research a lot further than what is in the book, and we've got some findings that, you know, really add to Rick's findings and really support his work, and we've got a few conclusions that kind of take away from some of it as well. But the item that we've never seen a lab report on, that we've never been able to get access to, is this item number 26, which was a stain in the hallway carpet. They cut it out and removed it, probably to take it and test it for the presence of blood. And the report is nowhere to be found, okay, as to what that was. Now, I have to believe that the case is very interesting in that, okay, they took this item, the report isn't available, but I think the prosecutor at trial, Gerard Sullivan, I don't even think Gerard Sullivan knew what direction he was going to take with the case when he made his opening arguments. Because in his opening arguments, in the transcript of the opening arguments, he tells the jury straight up, you know, that Ronald DeFeo, after 3 a.m., went to his father's room. He fired the first shot into his father. The first shot did not kill Ronald's father. So after Ronald, basically what he said, and I don't have the transcript right in front of me, but basically what he says that Ronald got up and was shot a second time by his son, and his son placed him back into bed where he would be found by police. And I think that's a very interesting statement, because after that point, it was never again in the trial addressed as to how he would have got him back into bed. And, you know, Ronald weighed about 270, and his son was about 160, 165. And as you said earlier, that's a lot of dead weight for a guy 165 pounds to move. So if that was a blood stain on the carpet, okay, they made that report, I believe, disappear because it was easier to prosecute DeFeo alone, and they had an open and closed case. In fact, it's funny because I'm seeing, to me, I see some of the same things happening with the Ronnie Chase and you know, the publicist in L.A. I'm kind of seeing some similar things happening with that case, you know, out here right now.
Well, it seems like, though, for something that must have garnered a lot of national media attention at the time, to have somebody allegedly kill their entire family, they needed to have a quick solution to it. They needed to have a neat, tidy answer as fast as possible. And when you can actually get Butch DeFeo to confess, then it makes it a lot easier to give yourself a framework to work within.
Exactly.
And
don't forget, too, and don't forget, the media was partially to blame. Not that you can ever stop that in the cycle of life, because that's just the way society works. Is that's why a lot of paperwork started disappearing. And my father, who was the first person to get this out there, if you will, all these things started happening, and then it made him look like an idiot at one point, which wasn't right, because he was there before most people were. You know, and he had no agenda. It wasn't like that. This is going back in time where there were no major, you know, things online and tools and all these things. I mean, this was hardcore research, fact-finding, interviewing, which is much like what Ryan is doing for this film. That's what he's been doing for years, is that hardcore, intelligent fact-find where you have to dig really deep. And then there has to be that kind of understanding that there are things missing. And how can that be? And people have a hard time believing that happens.
And Alex, you know, Alex raises a very good point, you know, about her father. You know, when I first approached Alex, I wasn't sure if I wanted to talk to Alex, if Alex brought anything to the table regarding her father's work. Because, you know, I told Alex straight up when I talked to her the first time, you know, I'm not really a big, huge believer in the paranormal and in haunted houses and that kind of thing. And I've never really believed that was what was going on in this particular case. And, yes, I did have a very tainted image of Hans, you know, going in. And through everything that Alex told me about the research that he had done, I walked out with a whole different picture of Hans Holzer and who he was. And, you know, our work is kind of parallel in a lot of ways, in that Hans viewed this as just a you know, one of his many cases. And he went in, he did his investigation, and he was done. And I'm seeing it kind of the same way as a film. You know, I'm coming in to make this, and this is not a career for me, and this is not my whole life. You know, so that's a very good point that Alex makes.
Well, we have a call here on the line, and I just want to stress, because with the last call we ended up losing Alex. When callers want to call in, and you can do so at 1-877-996-1420 or 508-996-0500. After you've made your point, if you could please hang up your phone, because if we try to hang you up, we're going to lose Alex again. And Alex,
I've been lost for years. Don't worry, honey. It's okay.
I was going to say, if it does happen, we'll just call you back immediately. We won't even bother saying hello. We'll just put you right through.
That's okay.
All right. Good evening. You are on Spooky South Coast with Ryan Katzenbach and Alexandra Holzer. How are you?
Hi, pretty good. Hey, Alexandra, I read your father's book, and he was convinced that Ronnie acted alone, wasn't he?
Well, he was convinced he was possessed, and he felt... Now, don't forget, his job was not to do forensics. His job was not to be, techie. It wasn't like that back then. And this is part of the problem that a lot of people today who are kind of getting used to, like, the CSIs that are out there and all the stuff that's coming up today. He didn't have access to every single thing. He had access to more of people who were in the area at the time. He had access to more human relations versus just, the facts of, this happened, that happened. And also, there were mistakes made from the police department, and he went off of what he knew and what was given to him that he was allowed to get. So here's, my father, who is a noted investigator who works with the mediums. He's not a medium, who asks a bazillion questions, and given in the time and the circumstances and how it went down and the fact that this case was very quickly pushed through. I mean, this hit a town. The town was devastated. It turned this nice, quiet waterfront town into this infamous murder story. Can you imagine? So all the politicians got involved. They told him to be quiet. Things started disappearing, and he was kind of used as the forefront of, okay, well, he's crazy, whatever, and this is the conclusion that, Ronnie's crazy. Well, my father felt through Ethel's work that he was possessed and he acted alone, absolutely. But his job wasn't to go into the forensics. That's not what was asked of him, and it wasn't what he proclaimed to be anything else other than who he was. That's the difference. He never said that he was anything more than who he was. And that's what's so frustrating. Because people just assume that, he went in there as a detective, as a cop, as all these different roles, and he was not.
So you feel if your father had more evidence like what Ryan is...
Well, yes, he was allowed back then. This is a different day and age. What surfaces today or 5 years ago was not then when he was there. It was not that you can't even compare the two.
Well, they used to keep stories. The police department would do all they could to keep stories from leaking out to the media.
Yeah.
To other people.
There was no internet.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the other thing too to remember is that Amityville, and Alex touched upon this. Amityville's a very elite community. Very well-to-do, very upper middle class community that you're dealing with here. So, the police department obviously wanted to reassure the people of this county and of this community that they were on the job and that they had their guy. They caught the perpetrator who committed this crime.
And
it was
quickly.
an open and closed case. And I want to point, I mentioned Ronnie Chaseman a few minutes ago, and I'm going to draw a parallel, modern day, contemporary, to the DeSantis story, is that look at the pressure that Beverly Hills Police Department is under, and look at the fear that has swept through the community when this high-powered L.A. publicist was murdered in her car while driving home. Yeah. And I'm sure that here we are, we're being told today, right now, granted a little bit longer of a period of time has passed than what passed in the DeSantis case. But here you have the Beverly Hills Police Department now basically saying that the guy who shot himself in the hotel in West Hollywood was probably the perpetrator of the crime and probably did it. And guess what? Open and closed. The community can sigh a deep sigh of relief now. The guy who did this is dead. He's not going to murder anybody else. And it's closed. But do we know the whole story? We only know the crust of what we're being told. And as I found in DeFeo, there is a lot more behind the story that hasn't been told. I mean, I think you guys saw in our trailer, in the very first trailer that we posted, Detective Gerard Gozaloff. I asked Gozaloff on camera, I said, was Bobby Kelsky, who was Butch DeFeo's best friend, was Bobby Kelsky ever considered a suspect in this case at all? Okay? And he immediately looks at the camera and says, shut this off. So there's a lot of details. There's a lot of stuff that I didn't know going into this. And I feel like I've read every book out there on this subject, and I still continue to find new things that I did not know.
Can I ask one follow-up question, please?
Sure.
Sure.
Yeah, in regards to the father being shot a second time in the hallway, there was 3 bullet holes in his body. There was 2 in his back and 1 in his front. And from the book High Hopes, it says one of the shots from the back destroyed his heart. So if he was first shot in the back in bed with his heart being destroyed, how does he get up and get into the hallway?
Do you know for a fact that that first shot was the one that hit his heart?
Well, the trajectory doesn't line up when you do it from the one on his front to the back. That doesn't come near his heart.
The trajectory doesn't line up if you're assuming that he's laying in bed. We don't know entirely for sure what position he was in at that moment.
The heart's on the left side of the body, and the bullet hole is on the right side of the body at the front.
I understand that, but do you also have the full autopsy?
No, do you? I don't think anyone does.
I do. I do have the full autopsy.
I thought you had to be a family member to get that, they were saying.
I have the full autopsy.
Okay, so you're saying the shot in the front got him in the heart. He came.
I'm not saying anything. I've turned it over to a forensic pathologist who is going to tell me in the next couple of weeks the exact trajectories and where the shooter was standing.
Okay, so do you think in the hallway that he was shot in the front when he was in the hallway?
I don't know that for sure. Okay, that's what I'm saying. We right now, we have our theories as to what we think happened, and I assembled, in the process of making this film, I have assembled a cast of roughly about 36 forensic people that are involved in this, ranging from psychologists to pathologists, okay? There's some blood spatter experts, there's some ballistics experts. I turned over every crime scene photo, every document, everything that I have amassed over to the forensic team, gave them an analysis. I gave them the official version of the story. I said, this is what they say happened. DeFeo walked from room to room. He first went to his parents' room. He shot them each twice. He crossed over. He shot his sister Allison. He shot the boys. Then he went upstairs. He reloaded, and he shot his sister Dawn. Okay? And I told him that's what happened. Now, you take the evidence, and you take the crime scene photos. You take the lab reports, you take the autopsies, you take everything that I've given you, and you tell me if that is correct or not. And the initial report that came back from the forensic team 3 or 4 months into this said, no, this is not what happened.
All right.
Okay, and then the questions began to come via email from different members of the team. What about this? What does this mean? What does that mean?
Ryan, I gotta cut you off. We have to take a break for the news, but when we come back, we'll definitely get right back into this. Stay tuned for more here on Spooky South Coast.
First with local news, talk, and sports. This is WBSM New Bedford, Citadel Broadcasting, AM 1420, WBSM.
Severson, more insight into the suicide of Bernie Madoff's oldest son, Mark, who took his own life overnight. Word comes that the Madoff son learned recently he could face charges in New York and London. ABC's Aaron Katursky in New York.
Mark Madoff hanged himself with a dog collar in his apartment here in Manhattan while his 2-year-old son slept in another room. His wife and 4-year-old child are out of town. A source close to Mark Madoff said the suicide comes as a big shock, though we're told recently Madoff had been very distressed. He has never been charged with a crime, though the bankruptcy court trustee recovering money for victims of his father's Ponzi scheme had just filed a new lawsuit that named Mark Madoff. We're told he was not handling it very well.
After 20 hours of surgery to repair a torn aorta, U.S. Ambassador Richard Holbrooke remains in critical condition in a Washington, D.C. hospital. Holbrooke, 69. Blizzard and winter storm warnings are up in 7 states. All flights are canceled in and out of Minneapolis-St. Paul Airport, where this man is stranded.
Could be worse. Could be a volcano, and we could be here for a week, you know.
Most areas around the Twin Cities have seen well over a foot of snow. There are some reports of 20 inches or more. It's near whiteout conditions in many areas. Blizzard's so bad, some states like Iowa and Minnesota had to pull their snowplows off the roads. Accidents and stranded cars are everywhere. Holiday parades and other events are canceled across the storm's path. Here in Minnesota, they haven't seen a snowstorm this bad in nearly 20 years.
ABC's Clayton Sandell in Minneapolis. Sarah Palin and Reverend Franklin Graham are touring relief centers in Haiti right now for the next few hours, while President Obama is pressing hard to get Congress to pass the tax cut compromise reached with Republicans. ABC News political director Amy Walter says many angry fellow Democrats are standing pat, determined not to go along with it.
This is more about psychology than it is about policy. There is a tremendous amount of frustration that they've already been cut out, even though they are still technically in the majority.
You're listening to ABC News.
Okay, that's 700 orders of manicotti to go. So, are you an elf?
Was it the ears, the bells, my zeal for Italian cuisine?
Well, it's just that.
I know, you don't get many elves in here, right? But with my Discover card, I get 5% cashback bonus. And that, my friend, is some real cannoli.
Now through December, get 5% cashback bonus at restaurants, clothing, and department stores with Discover card. Sign up at discover.com or call 1-800-DISCOVER. It pays to Discover. Limitations apply.
Now at the Home Depot, save up to 30% on select Christmas decorations. From LED lights and pre-lit trees to our Martha Stewart living decorations. You can fill that orange cart with all the red and green you need to make the season bright. Because we're lowering the cost of bringing home the holidays with up to 30% off select decorations. More saving, more doing. That's the power of the Home Depot. While supplies last, U.S. only. See store for details.
If gasoline prices drop, it won't be because of anything OPEC did at their meeting in Ecuador. The cartel decided to not change oil production. Crude oil prices are hovering just under $90 a barrel. Analysts say if the price reaches $100, that would mean $3 a gallon gasoline in every area of the U.S. Offering an olive branch to big business, President Obama plans to meet with top CEOs this week on Wednesday. A summit with leaders of businesses that are expected to include Google, Cisco Systems, IBM, and American Express. Mr. Obama's ties with corporate America became strained over concerns about the health care overhaul and regulatory reforms. White House officials say the outreach to big business could encourage firms to invest some of the $2 trillion in cash they have been holding on to. This man on a roof for a second night now says send money so we can get down. ABC's Richard Cantu explains.
Excelsior, Minnesota, west of the Twin Cities. Hospital executive Robert Stevens took to the roof of a local coffee shop, vowing not to come down until he'd raised $100,000 for his daughter's school. He's wearing 4 layers of long underwear, heavy boots, and a down coat. He's got a double-insulated sleeping bag and a tent. But then a major winter storm hit, and he's only halfway there.
I'm freezing. You need to get me off the roof, please. Make a donation. All we need is $50 or $100.
He says he thinks he's crossed the line into insanity.
This is ABC News.
Mortgages should be illegal because you're getting robbed every month. With a typical $200,000 30-year mortgage, you'll end up paying over $400,000 after interest. Hi, I'm John Commuta, creator of the Transforming Debt into Wealth system. My proven system can eliminate your mortgage and all your debts. Let me send you a powerful free CD. For your free CD, call 1-800-618-4001. 1-800-618-4001. 1-800-618-4001.
Chuck Sievertson, ABC News.
There's something about this fast-paced culture that's causing us to live life on a furious speed of fast forward. Hi, this is Johnny Erickson Tata, and something about this mindset keeps us from living just one day at a time. After breaking my neck when I was a teenager, I was forced to slow down and take one day at a time. And that is when I began to find solutions. I went back to college, began painting, writing. I learned to drive a van with a joystick clamped to my arm. I began to manage my own health care and take responsibility for finding people to help me get up, go to work. So, friend, may I encourage you to push the pause button today? Learn to take one day at a time. That's the way you live life. Handle what comes your way with grace and a little bit of serenity. It works for all of us, not just those of us who live life with a disability. From disabilitycampaign.org, learn to deal with life just for today.
You might not think getting work done on your home or apartment would have any effect on the way your child grows up.
I know my ABCs. Next time won't you sing with me?
But if it was built before 1978,
Spell glacier. Glacier.
renovations can spread lead paint dust that can be harmful to kids.
Glacier.
That's why the EPA now requires that your contractor be lead safe certified.
The 10? No, could it be? Touchdown!
In children 6 and under,
Madison
Lead paint can cause everything from loss of IQ and motor skills to behavior issues and severe learning disabilities. Disabilities that may not show up for years. Don't let lead paint take away your child's future before it even begins. For a lead-safe certified contractor in your area, visit www.epa.gov/get-lead-safe or call 1-800-424-LEAD.
A gout attack may prevent you from participating in everyday events that are your greatest joys. The most common form of inflammatory arthritis in men, gout affects millions of Americans. Gout attacks, which some have described as feeling like a severe burn, may occur when uric acid levels build up. Without ongoing management, gout may prevent you from enjoying life's simple pleasures. Learn more about managing this chronic illness at www.goutliving.org. This is
AM 1420
Arthritis Foundation.
Live local talk on the weekends. Saturday mornings with Lynn Poyant and Sunday with Dick Spurlett. Local news and local talk on the weekends. AM 1420 WBSM.
The CDC estimates that 1.1 million Americans are living with HIV or AIDS. An estimated 640,000 of these are not receiving treatment. I'm Susan Crosby, President Emeritus of Women in Government, and I'm here to share an important health message with you. The statistics are startling. 56,000 new cases of HIV are diagnosed each year in the United States. 1 in 4 new infections are in women. African Americans account for 49% of all new HIV or AIDS cases. On behalf of Women in Government, an organization of state policymakers, I want to urge you to talk to your doctor or local AIDS service organization today. Talk about getting the care, support, and treatment you deserve. There are effective medicines available that can help you manage your HIV. To learn more, visit womeningovernment.org.
Funding provided by the Bristol-Myers Squibb Company.
Spooky Southcoast is back.
I see you shiver with anticipation. Well, we're waiting. Patient. I can smell you. I'm not afraid. You will Look, I know the supernatural is something that isn't supposed to happen, but it does.
All right, welcome back. Hour number 2 of Spooky Southcoast. Tim Weisberg here, along with the silent assassin Matt Costa and science advisor Matt Moniz, broadcasting live on the WBSM airwaves as well as on Spooky TV. If you just go to SpookySouthcoast.com/SpookyTV or just click the little flash link up at the top of the page, you'll be connected with Spooky TV, where you can jump into the chat room and you can share your thoughts during the show. And there's always interesting conversations going on in there, sometimes regarding the show, sometimes not. And if you do go into the chat room, I want to remind everybody that you can double click on your name that shows up. That automatically gives you a name, and if you double click on your name, you can change your name to whatever you want and change your picture as well. So that's and I know that you can register with it to keep it every time you go in and all that stuff. I haven't gotten to that point. So each week when you see Spooky Tim, I try to have a different little icon next to it, at least for right now. But we were talking about the Amityville case before we took the break, and we're going to get right back into that with filmmaker Ryan Katzenbach and Alexandra Holzer. You can visit the websites. If you want to check out more about Ryan's film and find out more about when it's going to be released, go to amityvillefilm.com. And for all things Alex Holzer, just go to hauntingholzer.com. And of course, also you're both very active on Facebook, which is where I first found out about the film.
Yeah. Yay for Facebook.
It's like MySpace, only not as annoying.
What is it, MySpace or something? We started mixing it up. It got so crazy.
Yeah, Spacebook and all that kind of stuff. And
yes.
What was the one that I was going to start? I don't know. I had an anti-social network I was going to get going.
Ooh, lovely.
It was for people that just don't want to talk to anybody else.
I
would be a member of that if you get that started up.
Well, you can be one of the founders of it with me. It's kind of funny because like the more ingrained technology we get running this show between the webcam streaming and the Facebook and Twitter and all that stuff, the more I realize, gee, I'm the guy that doesn't really want to have to deal with people all the time, and now I can't go anywhere without everybody knowing what I do.
That shouldn't be too hard, though. What do you do?
Technology is getting ridiculous. I recently had a BlackBerry and I dropped it and I broke the face on the thing, and I went to go get a new phone, and they show me this Evo thing, and they're like, this is the phone that you need, and if you're on Facebook and all this stuff. And after they got done explaining everything that this phone would do, it'll connect to TV, you can play videos on YouTube, you can do everything under the sun. And I asked the woman a question. I said, does it make calls? Because you left that out, and if it makes calls, I'm sold. I'm an owner, but can I actually call somebody with it? And it's funny because when you called, you were the very first person that has called me on this phone, and I honestly didn't even know how to answer the thing. I'm like, what do I press to take this call?
Oh, that's like everybody wants to run out and get an iPhone for all the cool stuff it can do, but then they complain that they never get any of their calls.
Oh, but see, I just got the iPhone, and I love it. I think it's awesome.
Well, you must have one of the new ones.
No, I got the G3. I didn't get the G4, or whatever, the 4G, whatever. Listen, I'm not techie. I've never said I've been techie, so I don't wear that title. But I got the 3G network or whatever. Well, and I didn't want to go and spend the extra money for the 4G. I said, what's the difference? I just want to use the phone for emergencies. I have 4 children, so.
Well, whether you have an iPhone or a BlackBerry or an Evo, or even if you
I don't know what the hell Evo is.
2 tin cans with a string tying them together, we have all the apps up on Spooky TV for you to be able to follow along with the show wherever you are. And we were talking, before the break, Ryan, about the forensics team that you'd sent this information to, and you were about to say, you were mentioning how that they'd come back. Do you want to reiterate what you were saying?
Yes, and they gave me some very, very sketchy, very preliminary findings, and said, we've got a lot of questions. We're going to have to do this in a series of different meetings and a series of different sit-downs and what have you, and we're going to have to, digest this very slowly, because as you realize, this is like trying to tell the Bible in a small amount of time. And so we've begun this series. The process started we were tracking all year long. One of the things that you'll find is a lot of people have criticized me through the years for the fact that the film has taken so long. And our take on it is that we want it done right. We want to be correct in everything that we say, and if that takes extra time to back it up and to verify these facts, we're going to take that time until I'm sure that we've got it right. And through the beginning of the year, through the beginning of 2010, it looked like we were going to be ready to go sometime in November with a premiere date for the film. And as we got closer, I had always wanted to hire a couple of forensic experts to take a look at the case and really analyze it. And I wanted to analyze the psychology behind the case, because I think there's some very interesting psychology going on in the crime scene photos when you review those, and I'll get into that in a second if you want to hear about that. But the forensic team, so I hired the team leader, based on his credentials, and brought him into the scene. And then he brought somebody else, and then he brought somebody else, and somebody else brought somebody else, and pretty soon we built this really great team, and pretty much kind of covering every aspect of forensic science. Pathology, psychology, ballistics, blood spatter, all of those kinds of things. And I began to realize in the summer, as this was going on, that there was no way we were going to be ready by the fall of the year. So they came back and they said, we'll be ready to shoot our segment in November, and we'll be done with that. Well, as we got closer to November, the questions and the documents and all of the things that they were analyzing, we were still going through all of those. So we decided to move it to the 1st of January for the filming date. And I would say that we are definitely on the mark. We're going to make that filming date. And I am dying. You have to understand, I have not heard myself what their conclusions are. And I told them, I said, if you feel that DeFeo did this by himself, tell me that, and that's going to air. That's going to be part of the film. If you think he had accomplices, tell me about that. Tell me whatever you think happened. What I'm trying to present at the end of the day is the most comprehensive picture of what likely transpired in the DeFeo house. And in saying that, I will also say that I do believe that there are elements of the story that we will probably never know, that there's no one that knows. All we can do is piece together the facts as best as possible.
Well, why don't we take a step back here and go before the murders actually took place? And you mentioned psychology. Let's talk a little bit about the DeFeo family and what that dynamic was in that family, because there's rampant speculation about not only it not being a happy home, but also there being some shady dealings in the underworld with the family as well.
Well, the family, yes, there are some very, we obtained some interesting things. There's a lot of speculation over Mike Briganti. Now, Mike Briganti was Louise DeFeo's father, and he owned a Buick dealership on Coney Island Avenue. And Rick Osuna was one of the first ones in his book to assert that the mob had their fingers in this organization, and that the organization was a front for mob activity, and that the dealership did things on a low level, like laundering money and disposing of weapons and such, And, that stuff is very, very hard to document and very, very hard to prove. We went and we found quite a few files and quite a few documents that clearly connect the Briganti organization to the mob. And John Christopher Fine wrote a book. He was he was a part of the racket squad that was taking a heavy look at the mob and was very focused on mob activities in the 70s. And I tried to reach out to John Christopher Fine to get him to interview for the film, and he declined. Rick Osuna, when he wrote his book, had talked to Fine, and Fine basically said, I won't talk about the Briganti organization. I will not comment on any of the players involved. And we clearly got the idea that there might have been some kind of witness protection program or something, going on. But Fine wrote a book called The Racket Squad, after he left the Racket Squad. And in that book, he talked about a Brooklyn Buick dealership that was connected with the mob. And you have to just assume that was probably Briganti at that point. And so they were very well connected to the family. I believe we'll prove that beyond a shadow of a doubt in the film. And Big Ronnie DeFeo worked for his father-in-law at the dealership, and the job was basically a gratuity from Mike Briganti. And Big Ronnie DeFeo, there's a lot of endless speculation over whether or not he was abusive to his family. And when you examine that and when you look at that, you have to go back and you have to read a lot of the trial transcripts. And in those trial transcripts, Mike Briganti Jr., which was Louise's brother, he actually testified at trial that at one point when Butch DeFeo was around 2 years old, that there was a fight, and he picked up Butch and threw his toddler son across the room. There were also other instances of domestic violence that were documented in those transcripts. So I think it was a very tumultuous situation in that house. And then we get the stories that Big Ronnie DeFeo was actually, he believed that he talked and conversed openly with St. Joseph and with God. And I found numerous family, or numerous, not family members, but numerous friends, people who knew the DeFeos very well, and they each verified this, and they each said that, yes, this man believed that he could predict things. He believed that he could see into the future. He could predict the deaths of people. He had called his brother-in-law, I believe it was his brother-in-law, at one point, and told him that he had this psychic vision that Brooklyn and all of the South Shore of Long Island was going to get hit with a tsunami. And he told him, you have to evacuate, you have to get out of here, blah, blah, blah. And of course, needless to say, the tsunami never came. So you have this portrait in our film, you have this portrait of Big Ronnie, who is, abusive to his family. At the same time, he's kind of a religious fanatic, and as testified by various friends and people who knew the family very well, and so you kind of really get this clear portrait that this house was far from normal. In the quote of one of the jurors who was one of the interviewees in the film, she said on camera, she said, quote, "I never knew the definition of dysfunctional, until I sat through that trial."
Well, I have a question for you, and I'm not sure what the answer will be or if it's even relevant, but it's something that I want to ask here. You talk about Big Ronnie going through these experiences to speak to God, speak to St. Joseph, to have this strange persona. And I know that the family lived in the house for, 9 years at the time of the murders? It was actually Mike Briganti bought him the house in 1965?
Yes.
And you might not know the answer to this, but were these abnormalities with his personality, did they exist prior to moving into 112 Ocean Avenue?
To my knowledge, based on what I've been told, yes, but they escalated as the years went by. And he was becoming much more, by all accounts, much more delusional as time was going on.
So that could be more of just if there was an illness or something that was ramping up more so than just any kind of control that the property might have.
Right. What we always felt, Rick and I had talked about it at great length at one point, and based on the things that we've heard, we're kind of the mindset that the guy was bipolar or manic depressive or something along those lines, and that is why, it basically kind of almost a chemical imbalance. I think if Ronald DeFeo were alive today and his family were witnessing these kinds of things, I think they would simply take him to a doctor or a psychologist or somebody who would simply just put him on some meds, and it would have probably ended the issue at that point. But, you always have to go back when you do a period film like this. We think today, it's very easy for us to think in the context of today, and you have to go back and you have to think in the context of the time that all of this was taking place. You can't just say, well, give the guy some Zoloft and he'll be fine in 1974, because we didn't know what we know about the brain and depression and all of those things that we know today.
Well, Alex, I'll ask you this question because I know that your father is often credited as being the, I don't want to use the word inspiration, but he was kind of, his work and his writings were some of the influence in the script for Amityville 2.
Yeah, his book was used for the second one.
And a lot of that, of course, centers around the relationship of a DeFeo-like family. What were his thoughts on that family? I mean, you mentioned possession in terms of Butch DeFeo, but what were his thoughts on the family unit as a whole?
He thought they were nuts. He didn't want to be around any of it. When he interviewed DeFeo, he wanted to get as far away from him as possible. He came home, and the way he kind of talked about it with me was just there was not much to talk about. It was very negative. He felt it was like it brought him down. He saw this guy in prison and was saying things that he definitely, had, his impression of him. And, he kind of left it there. He didn't want to take it with him. It was a very negative environment. And part of what, there's dysfunction everywhere. Our own family growing up was dysfunctional. And my father couldn't recognize the dysfunction in our own family. So I don't think he would have recognized it with DeFeo and what was going on prior to leading up to the murders, because, when you're kind of living in a world where you think everything should be okay, and you're seeking, quest for truth beyond, which really was his job and his calling, it's hard to kind of look at the fact that, things are happening and they're bad. And where I kind of come into it and where he kind of came from was negative breeds negativity. And the one thing that I kind of was talking to Ryan about in the film was that when you have already a preset negative persona, and they go into a place that has a negative energy already, that's where the paranormal comes in as far as I'm concerned. It kind of just adds fuel to that fire. So if you already have this crazy, out-of-control family, a lot of negative, brouhaha Italian energy going on, and just craziness, and these kids are caught in the middle, and the mother isn't going to do anything to help because the father's overbearing. We've read these stories 100 times before. They end up in suicide, murder, jail time, you name it. And they move into this house with this property that already has problems, going back into the late 1800s. As far as I'm concerned, as far as the paranormal comes into play, there's a lot of negative energy that's festering. And that's kind of where he was coming from. And he didn't want to be around DeFeo. It wasn't like it was a picnic for him to go and interview this guy. This guy was pretty rotten to my father, which I found out recently, which really hurt me because I'm his daughter and I get defensive, obviously. It's my father. But he put up with him. He was rotten to my father. He would turn around and say things behind his back when my father was actually trying to help him. As convoluted as it sounds,
To interject, DeFeo was quite rotten to his own grandfather, for that matter. Mike Briganti, pretty much, this was pretty much something that obviously he lost his daughter and he lost all of his grandchildren in one swoop, because they only had 2 kids, and Mike Jr. never married and never had kids of his own, so Louise, this was his family. And he was haunted for the rest of his life by what happened in that house. And he would write these letters to Butch, and he would ask Butch, please, for the sake of my own peace of mind, what happened that night? I need to hear the truth. And DeFeo, I have all of these letters that he wrote to his grandfather, all the way through the 1970s, and he was horrid to his grandfather. He wrote in these mocking, nasty letters, and he would tell him that there were multiple people involved. And then he would write another letter, and he would say that he did it by himself. And then he would write another letter, and he would say that you'll never know what the truth is. And I think so what Alex is saying about what he did to her father, he did that to his own grandfather as well.
He's a sick human being. I don't care. It's almost like, whether he acted alone or whether he had all these accomplices and it went wrong and he was caught in the middle and he was sort of innocent but not really, he's sick. He definitely, if his father, had issues mentally, we know that's genetic. We know that today. So these are things that now you can kind of see a pattern forming. But my father certainly did not want to be around that, and of course he knew things were off with him, but he didn't want to bring that home. That's how he was with every case. It was not really something that we kind of, especially the negative ones, it was pretty horrible. It really affected him. He wanted to finish it and get away from it, and a lot of people don't know that.
I have a little saying that I use sometimes, and that's that dysfunction is a family's function. It's supposed to be the place where everybody can be a little bit crazy, and they're the ones that are understand and accept you no matter what happens. But it seems like in this case, it was something just rotten at the core. And there's speculation too, Ryan, that Dawn, the oldest sister, that she was involved with this as well. So now, if that is true, then you have not only one child that would want to consider patricide, but you have 2. So what does that tell you about the family dynamic?
Absolutely. One of the things that we discovered in the course of this is that Don DeFeo had a boyfriend, and the boyfriend's name was Billy, and Billy had gone to Florida or was in the process of going to Florida. I've heard of recent some conflicting things that he was actually still in New York and heading for Florida. We had always believed that he was already in Florida, but so what the exact truth is there, I'm not entirely for sure. But she had reportedly, she wanted to leave and go to Florida with him, and they had plans to get married, to live together, whatever, once they got to Florida. And she wanted out of the house so badly that she couldn't stand it. And at one point, she actually staged her own kidnapping. And this came from the files of the private investigator from Herman Race, who was the independent investigator hired by Weber later on during trial when he was defending DeFeo. And in that file, it says that Mike Briganti, the grandfather, got a phone call, and the phone call stated that his granddaughter had been kidnapped, and that if he didn't pay the sum of $5,000, she would be killed. So Herman Race went and personally handled this, and he told Mike when they got to the pier, to the designated rendezvous point, he said, "You wait in the car. I'm going to go take care of this." So he goes out. He finds two guys at the end of the pier. He confronts them. He says, they say something to the effect of him, "Are you Mr. Briganti?" He says, "No, but I have something from Mr. Briganti," and a scuffle ensues. And what Herman ends up doing is he ends up basically taking these two guys down to the wood deck of the dock, puts them basically at gunpoint, and says, "You either tell me where Don is at, or else you're going to get it." And at that point, he realizes he's dealing with two basically 18-year-old boys. And they confessed to him that they had been put up to this by Dawn, that Dawn had staged her own kidnapping in an attempt to get $5,000 out of the grandfather, okay, and that this happened not too long before the murder. Now, Tim, I have to ask you, what does an 18-year-old girl, okay, what would drive her to stage something like this, okay? And, of course, by the way, they told Herman where Dawn was at. They drove down the street to the designated point, and there she was, standing there. And Herman commented and noted that the grandfather was absolutely destroyed by the fact that his granddaughter had tried to squeeze in for $5,000. And so you have to ask yourself, what would drive an 18-year-old girl to the point of staging her own kidnapping and doing something like this? And obviously, my assertion is that things were so bad in the house that she wanted out that badly that she was willing to do whatever it took.
Well, I wonder why Briganti didn't see that as a really big cry for help, or maybe it's just the attitude of the family, the attitude of the culture to be more hurt than to be concerned.
That's the thing that we talk about in the film. To me, it's inconceivable, okay, that Briganti did not know what was going on. Okay, that Briganti had to have known that his daughter was the victim of domestic violence. That there's one point in the file where it talks about witnesses at the dealership saw Butch and Big Ronnie had gotten into a fight at the dealership. Okay, and Butch got in his car and was in the process of leaving. And as he was leaving, Big Ronnie came around the corner and threw a brick through Butch's windshield at him. So clearly, people knew that this was a very tumultuous situation that was going on, and how Briganti could have not known, it's inconceivable to me, as I said, but I think, more than anything, I think that Briganti just, on the wishes of his daughter, and consistent with the Italian family, I think that he just kind of put his head in the sand and honored his daughter's wishes because of how much he loved her. And if she said, "Dad, don't intervene, don't get involved," I think that's probably what he did or didn't do.
I agree.
Or it could even be a case, I don't know anything about the Briganti family, but it could also be a case of, that was how they did things too.
Well, the Brigantis, the interesting part about the Brigantis, again, from some people who knew them, very well, the Brigantis they were very, very upstanding, very noble people, despite their connection to the organization, so to speak. And Mike Briganti was this very loving man, and him and Angela had a great marriage, and this was definitely not anything that went on in their household, So it's inconceivable to me as to why Mike wouldn't have intervened, as to why Mike wouldn't have done something about this, But Mike also knew, right up around the point of the murders, Mike had also learned that Big Ronnie DeFeo had been stealing a large amount of money from the dealership and from the mob operation. So I think that where we were at in 1974 with all of this happening, I think that this family was really at a flashpoint. Something was going to happen. Whether it was whether it was the murders as we know that did transpire and did happen, or whether something else would have happened. It was frankly a matter of time.
Well, you mentioned the theft of large sums of money from the dealership and subsequently allegedly from the mafia as well. And that brings in one of the other theories about this is that this was a mafia hit on the family and that Butch was told to take the fall for it.
Well, that is Tim, an angle that is looked upon in the film. In fact, I told, as the forensic team, as I told you, I didn't want to taint them with any type of, predictions or my feelings on the case. I wanted them to go into it with a blank mind and be completely objective. As we got to talking further about the case, that became a question of theirs. Is it possible? So that caused me to have to make some phone calls and do some digging, and I got some pretty conclusive statements from some related parties that it was definitely not a mob hit, and that this was definitely not, and I got a lot of kind of, and I can't obviously say what my source is or how, but I got a lot of inside reconnaissance information into the way that a mob hit would work, and this was definitely not a mob hit. It's important to understand, the mob is very adamant that in a hit, when a hit is conducted, that no innocent person is killed. They consider that a cardinal sin. So if Big Ronnie was a problem, if Big Ronnie was someone that they needed to deal with, Big Ronnie would have been very discreetly and very quietly dealt with. And he would have not, absolutely not, he would have not been murdered in his home with his family as witnesses. It would not have happened. So the angle of the mob hit is interesting, but I don't think it really plays a part in this particular case. I think that, quite frankly, the tragedy that happened, and it was a horrifying tragedy that befell those innocent kids. I think that probably something would have happened with Big Ronnie alone down the road later on had this not happened.
Well, one of the things that we've talked about here in the past, and we had Jackie Barrett on the show, who, as you know, is now working very closely with Butch DeFeo.
Right.
She's a friend of ours. We know her.
And
yes.
No.
And she mentioned on the program, she mentioned the idea that prior to the DeFeos owning that home, that somebody had lived in that home that had practiced satanic worship. And is it possible now, Ryan, I'm asking you this not from a paranormal perspective, but more from that psychological perspective. Is it possible that perhaps Butch thought that he was under the influence of something in that home when he committed these murders? I'm not saying do you believe that he was under the influence, but do you believe that he believed he may have been under such influence?
Yeah, I understand the question completely, and I don't think so. I don't believe that he ever gave that any thought. I don't believe that he ever thought that that there was anything abnormal about his house or any of the prior people who had lived there, because one of the things that I think Butch fell back on as an alibi or, a kind of a preconceived story that he had cooked up in his mind as a way of covering this, I think he relied more upon the drug angle than anything else, okay? Because I believe I had read, and I was told by somebody later, that he had made the statement that he shot up heroin that day because he was hoping that if they give him any type of blood test or anything along those lines, that this heroin would show up in his system and that he would somehow not be responsible for the murder of the family because he was under the influence at the time. I think more than anything that was his fallback story. And by the way, we addressed that in the film, and I really do not believe, nor does a lot of the people that I interviewed, that DeFeo was in any way a hardcore user of drugs. I think that that's just something that came up later on when people speculated why he did it. The lead detective actually asked me, he said, or I asked him, I said, did you see any evidence of drugs? And he said, no, we made Butch show his arms to us, and there were no track marks anywhere on his arms. So we can kind of rule heroin out, as being a factor in it as well, I think.
Bear in mind, heroin can also be snorted, not just injected.
True. That is true too. That is true too.
But it also, if he did set himself up in this regard so that it would show up in the system, it does show even more premeditation to commit this crime, which I think the the possession angle, I think a lot of that stuff, it may have become convenient for Butch later on because of, Weber alleges that he hooked up the whole Amityville horror story with the Lutzes, and that he got Jay Anson to play along, and that basically, they concocted this story for money, and that also becomes a convenient out for Butch as well.
I agree, and I'll note too that I think that Butch DeFeo will say anything that Butch DeFeo needs to say at that moment to assert whatever position it is that he wants to get across at that moment. And so yes, I completely agree with that. But the thing is, one thing that you'll note in our film when you see it is that, we're probably more sympathetic to DeFeo than probably anybody ever has been in the past, And I really do believe that he was this kind of, screwed up kid, that had a very bad lifestyle at home, and I think his father heaped on cars and money and boats because I think his own father felt guilty about the things that he did, And so you have this kid that on one token is told by its father, you're nothing without me, you're garbage, you'll never amount to anything, and then on the other token, he's got all this cash and he kind of becomes this loudmouth braggart and all that to kind of hide his own insecurities. I think that the DeFeo that we see today, the one that is incarcerated, I think he's a completely different DeFeo than that kid. I think he is a product of the prison system, of being incarcerated for 30 years. So I think that anything that he says today is very suspect.
Well, in discussing the paranormal aspect and the idea of the Amityville horror and the fact that this house had some sort of influence over the family, and Alex, I'm sure you can probably comment on this, the idea that if enough people go to a place and enough people are projecting the idea of it being haunted, whether it is or it isn't, there's going to be some sort of energy that results from that.
Yeah, well, but the thing is, again, my father said the house wasn't haunted. The property had problems. Mm-hmm. Okay? There was a farmhouse on there that had burnt down. There was a whole history. He went after prior to. He didn't just go in there and say, oh, okay, this, now it's all. He didn't do any of that. And, the frustrating thing is, again, the assumptions that it was a haunting. It wasn't a haunting. It wasn't haunted. The only thing paranormal about it was the suggestion that perhaps he was under the influence of a negative spirit. And today, as we know, in the paranormal field, demons seem to be growing left and right. I don't know. But again, society, I think, is a bit more crueler, today, because I think things are just a lot harder. You have a lot more nastiness out there, is just my opinion. But it does breed. You are a product of your environment physically, yes, socially, yes. But there is an element that we can't fully explain, which is the unexplainable, the supernatural. And I feel that if there are leftover energies that are not positive, you can be influenced, especially as like how Ryan's trying to explain that there's a psychology here that goes back and back to the parents of the parents, that there's something that was brewing. And to go into an environment that's had problems before, maybe not murder, but things happening, always happening, and they're not good happenings, that it was just kind of adding to it, like I said, fuel to the fire. That that is something that many people believe in, and that when they walk into a place and they say, you know what, I don't feel right here, something's not, it's off. Or they walk into another place and say, oh my God, what a warm feeling I have being here in your home. It's something that goes into who we are as people, and that we use our senses, and it is not about facts or findings. It has to do with feelings, and it has to do with emotions, and part of being a human being. And that's the part that's the hardest to always try to, I wouldn't say prove, but explain that there's a mix here. And Amityville horror, there's a mix. There's facts, there's something else going on, a higher level that has to be harder to try to explain to people because you can't see it, and I think it's the balance of two things exploding. And that's why Ryan's film is just so amazing on the respect that he goes and he digs for these, backgrounds to kind of put together what could have been and what more than likely, a psychologist would say absolutely, because that's negative too. The behavior of the DeFeo family, that's negative behavior. Mm-hmm. So just because it's its own demons, you know what I'm saying? It comes in a different form, but that's not any better than if a black cloaked figure was lurking in the corner or the red room, quote unquote. I
think that evil, that we always associate evil, I think, with the devil. With an entity, with a haunting in a house, with a poltergeist, with whatever. And I think we forget that as humans, we're very capable of a very real human evil in our own ill wills towards each other, and our own, greed, and our own insecurities, and in all of those things. So evil to jump in there, Alex. I think that evil can be man-made, or it can be of another plateau.
Yep. And I think a lot was going. My honest opinion, I think the property had issues. I think you can be a walking ghost in a forest. I'm sorry, but if I died in the middle of the woods and I didn't like where I was and I was confused and I'm just lingering and you're not coming to ghost bust my hiney, I guess I'll be stuck between the trees. Okay, but I'm still there. It's kind of just part of the field itself and the science to it and the understanding that we occupy space and time, and where there's layers to it. It's not black and white. There's gray, and the whole, I'm just like a firm believer that there's a lot of things going on in that area. In the town of Amityville, if you look into the cemetery, there's a lot of bad people that live there, and a lot of things that happen, and I just think there are places in life that just are bad, and that's just the way it is. And Ryan is trying to put a positive on this because there was so much tragedy that came out of it that, we're just trying to get past and say, well, there's a lot of things that a lot of people don't know, and those evils, I feel, are partially the environment, partially the people, partially things that happened prior to.
And we know that, even if there's scars by negative energy. It definitely leaves an imprint on a location. And the negative energy from what happened to the DeFeo family could have been enough to leave an imprint for whoever occupied the home next. And, was some of that sensationalized, or was some of that put over the top for, sales purposes and money-making? Right. Sure, but it's entirely plausible that what went on there could have had some sort of lingering effect, not just necessarily in a paranormal sense,
right.
But also in the
paranormal welcome mat.
Well, but not only just that, but also in the psyche of the next people that walk into there.
Well, come on, if a realtor, it's like, if a realtor disclosed to you, oh, this is, you've got like that house is amazingly gorgeous and the property, and you've got the bay. If somebody said, oh, by the way, a family of, X amount died here, but here it's, you would not buy it. And if you did, you're crazy, because then you just care about the money and it doesn't bother you. Well, when the lights go out, and I'd like to know, as I sit there with my camera and film you, how you feel now. Because that is just something that I always think that when we went house hunting, I wondered, is there somebody buried under here? Because I'd never know. I swear to God, that's the product of being a holder. These are the things that go through your mind. Sure. But happiest day, house hunting, not for me. But, I think of dead bodies. So, I don't know.
Well, Ryan, I'll say this. The hallmark of any good documentary film is that it generates some controversy before it's even released.
I agree, and we don't seem to have come upon any shortage of that controversy, and I just, and the problem is, I want to talk about the case, and I want to talk about the documents, and I want to talk about all of the things that we found, but I'm kind of at a disadvantage right now because I can't do that, because there's so much meat in this film, in this piece, that I don't want to give it away before it comes out, and some of the people that we talked to, that we interviewed on camera are amazing, in really digging in there and really finding out about who these people were, what they were about, their house. I did a lot of digging into the history of the house itself, when it was built, who built it, tracked down, as many people as I could that could tell me about that. And, it's a fascinating story. And I know, as I said earlier, I'm still on a daily basis learning things that I've never heard before, that I didn't know.
Well, and I'm afraid to say this name because if I do, I may have to pay her. But Tracy DeFeo is somebody who's taken exception with the work that you've done, and I can't keep track of which side she's on anymore. Like, I don't really know who she's stumping for and who she's against anymore. I just know that you're one of the people that are in her crosshairs.
Yeah, she hates my living guts, and I don't really care, frankly. I think my own personal opinion of her is that she's just a person who married DeFeo, and I realize I have to keep this clean. She married DeFeo to get her 15 minutes worth of fame, and she got her 15 minutes worth of fame. And DeFeo has now, as I told her was going to happen in the email, she sent me some nasty email a couple years ago, and I wrote her back an email, and I said, I want you to put this on your calendar, and I want you to mark that I said these words on this date. When DeFeo runs out of his use and his tolerance of you, okay, he will get rid of you, okay? And when he gets rid of you and he sues you for divorce, he will sue you alleging that you stole his documents, alleging all of this insanity. I know. I've been to court with DeFeo 2 times, and I've also seen all of the lawsuits that he's filed against anybody through the years that has tried to help him. It's just a cookie-cutter thing that he does, and so I don't know if you know this or not, Tim, but in August he filed for divorce against Tracy.
Oh, really?
Just like I said he would, so as far as whose side she's on these days, I don't imagine it to probably be Butch's side.
Probably not anymore, no. But yeah, there's that kind of person. You know what I'm talking about, though.
Oh yeah.
There's a reason why they put out those magazines and they leave them, near the Lonely Hearts clubs that have all the pictures of the people in prison who are looking for a pen pal.
Exactly, and that right there, that could almost be a psychological study in and of itself. That's almost another documentary. Women who marry convicted murderers.
That's a reality show, honey.
Produce, but it would definitely be an interesting case study in who does that and who marries them and takes their kids into the facility, to meet this man. And what are you thinking? I mean, do you actually see this guy as being a potential father figure to your children? I mean, how could you not think about what it's alleged that he did to his own siblings? I mean, I don't know if you've ever seen, I imagine most people haven't, the crime scene photos, the really horrifying crime scene photos that I've got, And, I mean, the close-up picture of the wound to Allison DeFeo's face, I mean, it is horrifying. How could anyone drag their kids into a visiting room knowing that this man is associated or committed this crime, shooting his 13-year-old sister, Allie, who is absolutely a gorgeous child, shot her point-blank range in the face. You can see the stippling all over her face, which tells you that the barrel of the gun had to be practically against her cheek. I'll never understand that psychology.
Sick.
Well, and of course you had to go and mention that it would make a good reality show, and all of a sudden it'll pop up on Discovery Channel or A&E.
I want that to say. That was my idea.
Make sure you get your cut.
That's right.
Exactly,
Who wants to marry a mass murderer?
Yeah, there you go. Do it in like a game show format. Instead of handing you a rose if he picks you, he hands you a little hatchet.
Exactly.
Or nail file.
The question I have, is I know that she was, always talking about trying to get him out of prison and that he was going to walk free one of these days and blah, blah, blah. And I would just like to ask her face to face, Tracy, would you and your kids, would you want to sleep? Could you actually sleep at night in a house with this man in this house with you, knowing what happened 36 years ago? I mean, I would love to just ask that question face to face, and to see the reaction, because I don't understand how anybody could do that.
Well, we're just about out of time now, so I guess we'll just leave it at that. But I'm sure you'll get your chance someday to speak to her face to face. It's just
oh God, I hope
there might be
not.
lawyers present on both sides when it happens. All right, so Ryan, you definitely got to keep us up to date with when the film is going to be released. We'll have you back to talk about it when it actually comes out. Are you gonna put it in theaters first? Is it going to be having a run in some theaters, or is it going to go straight to video? Or
well, we're still going around and around over that, and we've had a series of negotiations with a network, with actually multiple networks, and it's all kind of up in the air as to what we're going to do. And I can tell you the piece has pretty much expanded to 6 hours with the forensic segment. Wow. So in terms of theatrical release, that's a pretty unruly film to try and put into theaters, you know. And they said, well, could you cut it? Could you shorten it? And I'm against shortening it just because, you know, the info floats so well that, you know, where do you begin to cut out detail? Especially when it all builds up to the final hour, you know, to really tells the truth behind what happened. You know, so I'm not sure yet at this point. The one thing I can definitely say is that one way or the other, the piece will make it out onto a box set. That is an absolute certainty.
Excellent. Well, please keep us up to date. Thank you for making this film and telling the true story behind the Amityville murders. It's called Shattered Hopes, the true story of the Amityville murders. It's amityvillefilm.com. And thank you, Alex, for carrying on your father's work. Hauntingholzer.com is your website, right?
Yeah, it's old, but it's fine. People can find me. You know me, so it's fine. Thank you.
You can find her everywhere. She's very easy to find.
Well, thank you, Tim. Thank you very much for the opportunity to have us on and to talk about it. And anytime that you want to chat about Amityville and the dysfunction associated with it, give me a ring.
Absolutely.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks. Have a good night,
Alex.
and happy holidays to you both.
Same
Happy
to you.
holidays to you too, Tim.
Bye-bye.
Be well.
Bye-bye. All right, that'll do it for this week's episode of Spooky South Coast. We'll be back next week to talk more about the paranormal, and we'll be here each and every Saturday night from 10 to midnight. And we're online. SpookySouthCoast.com is the place to find all the archive shows. You can find the links to our video podcasts there, and every video that we do now on Spooky TV is automatically made on demand immediately after the show. So if you miss any part of it, you can just go to Ustream, search for Spooky South Coast, and you can find all of our videos and get them right away. So until next week, for Matt Costa, for Matt Moniz, I'm Tim Weisberg. We want you all to stay spooktacular.
Rest assured, listener, that my time here has not been easy, and what you have just heard was not fiction. Although, in many a desperate moment, I most certainly wish it had been. It's over for now, it seems. Or at least, until yesterday begins again. Tomorrow.
Supernatural is something that isn't supposed to happen, but it does happen.
First with local news, talk, and sports. This is WBSM New Bedford, Citadel Broadcasting, AM 1420, WBSM.
From ABC News, I'm Hillary.